Reputation Solutions Providers Limited, Nigeria. It's my pleasure welcoming you to this all-important Zoom meeting. When it comes to PR and measurement, it's just like a doctor treating a patient. If you do not have metrics to measure, your treatment, you might just be walking in, you wouldn't know what you have done or the effect of the medication you are giving or the treatment you are giving to the patient. So, and it's actually become a lot more interesting these days with the social media, when you have various other metrics, mostly quantitative this time around. Before we could use a bit of more of qualitative measurement than, quantitative measurements. But with the current age we are in now, quantity and quantitative metrics are playing a greater role. And today we are talking about brand health, which refers to the overall status of a brand, including the perception, the reputation, everything that pertains to the brand, and we are talking about its assessment and the metrics. So I am very delighted about this particular topic. It's a very interesting topic, and a lot of media practitioners or PR practitioners, should be very, very interested in. So I welcome you to this event, and with the people who will help us in, really dissect this particular issue we have at hand. We have Francois van Dijk, who is the head of operations at Onico, joining us from Johannesburg. We have Femi Ademo, the communications manager at Bolt Nigeria. We have Steph Bridgman, who is the measurement evangelist. And then we have Charles B. So I welcome you to this important discussion. And to set the ball rolling, I call on Van Dijk to assist us in telling us what you do and your career journey and how this has been able to help you maintain success.
So great. I studied public relations a very long time ago, and particularly because I was interested in the marketing, advertising side of things, but also the journalism side. So PR was sort of the middle way for me, and started off in corporate communications. Back in the day, we had our clippings books with articles, or we read through the newspapers every day. And 22 years ago, actually, end of this month, I joined Onico, which is a brand intelligence company, which works with advertising, data collection, and through the years we added the editorial news kind of data, the social media data, and a lot of other data sources which affects brands. And I oversee operations at Onico. Also directly oversee our analysis team, and we became members of AMEC, the International Association for the Measurement and Evaluation of Communication. And I've been blessed enough to be a board director on AMEC for 6-7 years already, with my colleague Steph over here, which is also a board director from AMEC, and I'm quite pleased that she joins us and brings some of her wisdom from the UK to the table as well. She's very accomplished, so looking forward to discussion.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I don't know if Steph has anything to join and tell us a little bit about yourself and what your career journey has been.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks, Francois, for that those kind words as well. I've been in the industry just a teeny weeny bit longer than you, Francois. It's 20. I've got 3 years over you, so I've been in the industry 25 years, and I've seen the same kind of change happening in our communications and publicity and PR sphere. You know, back in the day, in the late 1990s, we were talking about measuring print and broadcast, and then the internet came along some point after, well, around about 1999 for me. I think that's when it came along for me. And then the social media came along. So it's been a really fascinating industry to be in and to see it evolve pretty much over a course of a whole generation. I run my own small measurement agency. We're actually AMEC Small Measurement Agency of the Year 2023. We won that at the AMEC Awards last year. And as Francois mentioned, I've been on the AMEC board for about 4 years now. I support measurement companies and PR agencies with their measurement and their analytics, and we also work directly with brands themselves to make them understand and get the most out of their media insight data. So that's a little bit about me. Thank you. Thanks for having me too.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. It's well noted. Charles B. Sorry, please could you help us a little bit at this about yourself?
All right. Thank you, Ezedi, and welcome everyone. I'm Charles Bassi. The B is for Bassi. I am actually speaking out of Abuja from the Central Bank of Nigeria precisely. Over the years, I would say in the last 10 to 15 years, I come from the background of psychology and risk management, where my primary focus has been in the aspect of reputation management, within the financial services industry. And I've worked around content management, in terms of information and the entire gamut, internally and externally. And of course, helping our institution also transition to embracing social media when we had to deal with issues around sentiment analysis and understanding perception of the public to different offerings by financial services industry. But in recent times, and a part of that has been around change management and of course strategy and policy within the financial services industry. So this sort of informed my background. And so we work with numerous players within the industry, internally and externally, to be able to understand what's the public engaged with, and how can we also deliberately and intentionally reflect what we want to communicate in terms of our value proposition to the different publics that we interact with. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. You see, I would want to have more of you, Chazby, because for the private sector, these measurements play very key roles in decision making. I want to know, how does it apply in the in the public service? Because we believe that my public service practitioners or players in that sector do not take matters like measurement so to heart. Is it really true, or can you shed a little more light on that?
Thank you, Ezedi. Well, I know that within the public service sector, we have, I would say, different categories of players. I work within the regulatory space, and I often would see my work from regulatory activism, in the sense that our job is to serve the interest of the public. And if we do not understand how they perceive how the services are being rendered to them, then we are probably just working within our own armchair space. And so what we do intentionally is that we have different job functions that try to effectively on a daily basis map what's happening within our different, with our different publics, and what are the demographics that also respond to the different facilities or offerings that we do. So the public sector, the public sector I work with actively track, what's happening there and measure public perception, and also try to influence that public perception in a very methodic and very objective manner, because we take that consideration. If you would remember, I think a few weeks back, when the debits, that were supposed to have commenced in terms of the new Cyber Act, where people were supposed to pay money, a certain percentage of whatever transfer they make from one account to the other. When that was to be released, we were only implementing that from a regulatory standpoint, because as regulators, we're expected to abide by the laws of the land. But when the sentiment in the public, was actually mapped, it was clear that it wasn't something that the public felt they were carried along. And under the economic realities, recommendations were made to the presidency, and that was sort of put on hold. So there is really an active process of engagement with the public to be able to harness relevant data and use such data for advisory services, for advisory purpose, and also for even regulatory amendments, as the case may be. So there is really an active. I do know that for the bulk, for the larger chunk of the public service, this has not really taken hold. But it's actually engagement such as this and various other platforms that we try to bring to the fore the need for the different sectors within the public sector, to incorporate these into their practice if they must save the public interest and build trust in public institutions.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I appreciate that insight. Yeah. So Femi, Adeyemo, I like your own sector too, because it's a life sector and it's a sector driven by, should I say, more of the new generation. So I don't know how your journey, especially in both Nigeria, has been. So could you share some insights, please?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and it's nice to be here with everyone. And thanks for having me. I think for me, my career has been around different sectors. I spent more of my career in PR agency. So I've worked with a lot of PR agencies in the past. Both local agencies and international PR agencies. This will be my second time in the client side. So yeah, like I said, I've had the privilege to work on different brands, and both local brands and multinational brands. Yeah. But yeah, right now I'm both Nigeria. I'm the communications manager, and it's been a really great experience. Like I said, I had most of my career in PR agency, but a little bit of difference really working in agency and now when you are on the client side. I think for me, the major thing is how you just have one brand to you, which is your baby, right? This is what you live and breathe every day, which is different from the life and the experience in agency, whereby you have to manage different accounts or different brands, and then you are not really focused more on just one. I think so far it's been great. And like you said, the sector where I am now, which is the ride hailing, it's I'll admit, like you said, that it's new generation, like you said, but yeah, it's really interesting, and I think that's the fun of PR. We get to learn every day, and you bring your expertise to whatever sector you find yourself.
Yeah, I think there's some issues with technical issues there. But can you hear me, Femi?
Yes, clearly.
Yeah, before I let you go, because I think here we still want to understand why this meeting is important, and then what is the rationale actually for measurement in PR?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question. And personally, for me, I think I would say you are not doing PR if you don't measure whatever you're doing. And like, I mean, I remember saying I started from PR agency, and I remember where I started from. That was Quadrant MSL. Used to be Quadrant company as at then. Once you join, the first thing you do is you'll be with the monitoring department. That's where you start learning the PR from, because it's and that shows how important measurement is, because it gives you a lot of insights. I mean, without proper measurement, I think whatever strategy you are coming up with as a PR professional, I don't think is well detailed. I'm sorry to say, because having these measurements is what will help you make informed decisions, and will help you, will guide your strategy. I mean, so because you already know what the perception is about your brand, what your competitors are doing, and these are the things you need to come up with your strategies and make informed decisions about your brand. So for me, I think measurement is something that is really, really important to PR. And like I said at the beginning, I don't think you're really doing PR if you don't measure whatever you're doing. And I mean, beyond saying you needed to inform your decisions as well, after doing your strategy, whatever you've done, you need to measure success as well. And how you're going to measure your success is by monitoring and be sure of whatever you've done, to be sure you've actually achieved success. You've actually achieved your goals, your set goals from the beginning of your campaign. So for me, it is the importance of measurement to PR cannot be overstated. And I think that's why I've said something like, you're not really doing PR if you don't measure whatever you're doing.
Thank you. Steph, I don't know if you have anything to add to this, as in the rationale why measurement in PR efforts, is very important.
Yeah, I think without measurement, it's really hard to demonstrate with just a bunch, say, of press clippings, really whether you've achieved the objective or delivered on the strategy that you were paid to do. So I think that measurement is a really integral part of PR in terms of demonstrating that the impact that PR can have on an organization's objectives. And that speaks to some of the best practice that we should be aiming for in our PR measurement, because we shouldn't be measuring just for the sake of measuring. We should be measuring to tell an interesting story. And that interesting story should have at its heart, well, what are we trying to achieve through the PR? That's the objective. And once we've got an objective, and perhaps if it's a measurable objective, then when we can count things, we can much more easily demonstrate the success at the end of it. Because we can tell whether the PR has delivered on an objective. Without an objective and just a bunch of ideas for campaigns and activation, with an end result perhaps of some press coverage, some social media posts, what are we really achieving for the organization? So it's about wrapping PR activities around more strategic elements and elevating the value of PR in itself. If you think about our friends who might work in the advertising industry, they have very confidently backed up their campaigns for many decades now with really robust data, well, seemingly robust data, but actually it's all about the confidence that they have in their measurement data. And I think that this is where PR needs to be heading in this decade now, is to be building its own confidence in the data that it reports on, having that kind of swagger that the guys have in the advertising world. And ultimately, that will land in better budgets for PR practitioners, which is better for all of us all round. So it's a sort of never-ending circle of improvement and demonstrating value. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Van Dyke, while we are still on this rationale, how do you, from your practice, how do you think clients, view the importance of, measurement in PR efforts? Do you think they take it very seriously, or they just do it like, we are doing this PR because it's something we think we want to do, just like a feel-good project?
In the measurement world, we always talk about the measurement journey. So Some of us are only starting on that journey. Others are already way down the road. So it depends very much, I think, on our organization itself, but also individuals in that organization. As Femi and Steph's very much said here, and I believe it fully myself, you're not a PR professional at all if you don't wrap everything in measurement. You need to start with measurement, during your campaigns do measurement, and end with measurement, and then that cycle starts, because you need to learn from it. Because that's another thing PR professionals fool themselves with, is that every campaign is successful. Maybe it's not successful. In many cases, it is really not successful, but you must learn from your failure as well as not to make that mistake in future. So I do think, as you've mentioned, there's obviously some organizations that don't really bother that much with public relations, and others that's very concerned about it. But the reality is, it's all in the name of public relations. It's relationships with different publics. I also think that is a mistake some PR professionals make, in that they think it's only media relations, but it's much bigger, because it also speaks to your employees, it speaks to your stakeholders, your shareholders, even to government and regulators and all of that. So it is of absolute crucial importance that you take building those relationships, and also professionalizing it through better measurement practices. As Steph said, the reality is we don't just do PR for the sake of PR, but we need to affect the change. We want that there's a existing challenge or state of affairs that we want to address, increase sales, increase blood donations, decrease smoking, or whatever the case may be. So there's changes that we need to affect through our communications, and we won't know if we're successful or not if those objectives have not been set up in front before you've done any PR yet. So absolutely crucial.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know, Charles, I think let me just come to you briefly. United World Health Organization defines health, because this our discussion borders on brand health. World Health Organization defines health as not just an absence of a disease, but the ability to, relate and live a life that, is devoid of any sociological, psychological, or any impediment. So I should think that we could actually bring that to brand health. It's not just our sense of, say, crisis, but, like they say, to manage the strengths, weaknesses, be able to the overall brand health. So how can you just like attempt to conceptualize what we should be looking at or looking out for in brand health?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ezedi. Just in relation to the World Health Organization definition of looking at health from psychosocial, physical, mental, and all of that, very comprehensive manner. When you're looking at brand health, you're not just looking at return on investment. You're not looking at what people are saying about a particular brand, as the case may be. You're looking at, for instance, you're looking at elements of brand sustainability over time. You're looking at issues around even awareness of the brand. You're looking at issues of reputation. You're looking at issues of its integration of the brand within its particular operating ecosystem. So if you must ensure that a brand health is maintained on a sustainable manner, taking on from the issue of measurement, for me, measurement comes when the rationale for that lies in its capacity to facilitate planning. Because if you are going to be talking about measurement, then you must factor in planning, research, planning, over time, budgeting for that. You don't just do it as a nice to have activity or a one-off activity. It's something that people are committed to. Competencies and capabilities are being built around that so that people are able to track the different elements, what it has to do with reputation, what it has to do with resourcing. Because one aspect of brand health that people tend to overlook is resourcing. Resourcing is not just about attaching a specific budget to it. Resourcing has to do with what kind of technologies do you need to deploy to ensure that brand health is attained? What kind of capabilities or even change of processes or procedures within the ecosystem that need to be put in place? Understanding also the political context or the environmental context within which a particular brand operates. So these are various elements that one has to, it's like doing like a pestle analysis of the context within which a brand operates. If you do not understand all of these elements, you are going to likely put either more weight on something that shouldn't have more weight, or less weight on something that should have more weight. So it will create some kind of imbalance, in how you engage with the brand management process. So brand health gives you space to understand the different dimensions of activities that needs to be done, what kind of empowerment you need to put in place, what kind of resourcing you need to put in place, what kind of leadership or strategic relationships or partnerships you need to build, to ensure that, this is being attained. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. And then we'll I want us to go down straight to, there are two major, should I say, classifications actually of, metrics, quantitative and qualitative metrics. So, Steph, if I come to you, will you just help us to conceptualize, the qualitative metrics and, what it means and, what it brings to the table when it comes to brand health?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Well, when I first work with brands around measurement programs, I speak to them and think of first principles that they may have learned when they were learning about comms in the beginning, which is often that when one wants to communicate perhaps a policy or a campaign or a news story, the key things you want to communicate is the who, the what, the why, the where, and the when. And I try and break my measurement programs into those kind of categories too. And if one thinks about it, the who is a qualitative metric. It's about which journalists might be writing about your brand or organization, or which commentators in the media might also be talking about issues affecting your brand. The what is about, what are they saying about your brand? It's a qualitative metric. It's potentially around sentiment. It's potentially around the messaging that they're going to be delivering for your brand. Why is another qualitative metric. Why has this content come into existence? What activity did you do as a PR person to create this content, or did this content come to exist for another reason, perhaps a crisis or an issue that the brand is facing? But then you've got the where and the when, and those kind of quant metrics. The where might be which publications, which sources might you be appearing in, or which media types. So that could be print media, broadcast, social media, and so on. And the when is just the kind of timestamp, as how is this developing over time? What is the trend? So I try and break some of those kind of key metrics down into what fits into quant and what fits into qual. And obviously quant is the data that can be accessed at greater volume and at greater speed, and can be processed at a much more affordable level, whereas your qualitative metrics increasingly can be done by computers, but I'm more of an advocate for humans, because I'm still not convinced that AI and large language models and so on are really there yet and doing really good qualitative media analysis. But the qualitative is the stuff that the humans, I think, are still really good at, and they ask perhaps the most difficult questions about your PR, and perhaps the most difficult elements of the evaluation. And it's about, you know, it's really about that sentiment and that messaging. That's where the qualitative aspect comes in.
Yeah, thank you. Before we actually leave this, when it comes to qualitative measurement, I want Femi, sorry, I will come back to you now. How in your agency life, I should, you know, say, how do you deal with quantitative data or, you know, quantitative metrics towards evaluating a brand's health, maybe in your agency or one of the agencies that, you know, you've worked?
Thank you. I mean, whether it was during my agency days or even right now, they are still all in play, right? Measurement is something that's important, and both quantitative and qualitative measurement are something that I deal with every day. And just to answer your question, I think it's more, both are quite important. And to be honest, I would say both complement each other. Even though, as we all know, that quantitative deals more with data, with the numbers, which is
No,
what...
I want us to, before we go to quantitative, I want us to deal with qualitative. What are those intrinsic data that you look out for, and how do you manage? Because, you know, my own experience with, you know, sometimes they ask you, okay, how is it positive, is it neutral, is it negative? Sometimes, you know, it can be something that is neither positive nor negative nor neutral. I don't know if you have had, you know, come across such an issue before. You know, you might not just say, you cannot just say it is purely positive, and you cannot just say it's purely negative. So some people will just drop it into neutral.
Yeah.
So you have a way of reporting such occasion so that, you know, it will be put in a better perspective than these three categorizations here. Femi, can you hear me?
And thank you. And I sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Right. I said I've been in this situation a couple of times, even recently, where I'll have to even share with some of my colleagues to say, sorry, do you think this should be neutral or negative most times? Because you struggle to see if the mention is actually neutral or negative most times. Right. Positive most times is always straightforward. You know, this is a positive coverage for us. But then the truth of it is, I think it all boils down to the objectives that you've set from the beginning, or looking at what are your brand objectives. That is how you eventually have to decide if such coverage or mention is negative or neutral or positive, right? Like you said, many times I've been in cases where even when I get the coverage from the agency and the target sentiment as neutral, I feel this is negative. And reason for that is back to what I said, that you need to look at what are your objectives, right? What we're trying to, how well as the key message being passed in that coverage or in that mention. So that is what we then help you to narrow it down. So this is actually negative because maybe the journalist that is publishing the story or whatever feedback you're getting is not capturing the key message that you're trying to have as a brand. So I think that is what eventually will help, because whether we like it or not, we have just positive, negative, or neutral. We are meant to pick from those three. And so in cases where you are struggling to see if a particular coverage is neutral or negative, you then have to look like, oh, how well has the key message been, how well as your key message come out from this coverage. I think that would then help to narrow it down to make a decision about capturing that as a negative mention or neutral or positive. But like I said, most times positive mentions are quite straightforward. You hardly struggle with that, because of course, this is what we're trying to say. This is what this coverage is about. But most times you struggle between negative and neutral. And to be honest, I've had that most times. And like you said, I'm in the ride-hailing sector. So let's say, for example, there's a coverage about a boat driver being robbed, right? You'd have to look at it. The boat driver is being robbed, which is not because of the fact that he's a boat driver. He's being robbed because, robbery happened, and it could happen anytime to anyone. But then we have to look at it. Will this be reported as a neutral coverage, or will it be a negative coverage? So what we then look at in cases like that is to see how well the brand message has come out, how well the brand, how well the report is positioning the brand, right? So I think for me that's how I look at it. And like I said, there's sometimes I believe you understand your brand better, and that it's most times depending on what you understand to be negative for your brand or what you understand to be neutral. Because most times the agency will send you what they capture as neutral will actually be negative for you, because you feel this is not something that we want brand. So I think for me, it's all about.
All right. Thank you very much, Femi. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. As much as at the point I lost connection. Yeah. But so on that, back to you, please. Also, as in line with conceptualization, place we are now, can you put these quantitative metrics, in perspective, so that we can understand ourselves before we even try to get to know what the interplay of both metrics, are?
Okay, so if you look at now a MEC, the organization or the association which Steph and I and P Plus belongs to, created what is called the Barcelona Principles, which provides guidance through 7 principles on how to approach best practices from a measurement perspective. And the 4th principle actually talks specifically about that you need both quantitative and qualitative kind of metrics and analysis. And I always try and explain it in such a manner. We had 100 articles in the press this month. That's great, but except all of them were negative. So it's not that great. So that is an easy way to really look at it. I mean, just looking at about what Femi said around sentiment as well, because that is obviously one of the most common sort of qualitative measurements. Is that I understand his challenge, because the reality with sentiment and one of the problems with sentiment is that it probably depends on the eye of the beholder, because what's positive for you is maybe negative for me. I always use the example of a mine that retrenches many mine workers. It's obviously negative for the mine workers. For the shareholders, it's positive. For the average guy in the street, it's maybe just neutral. And on the flip side as well, because you are in the brand, because you see this coverage, you may consider it negative or positive because you know the story behind it, but that's not necessarily how the media reports it. So there are those sort of challenges with sentiment. But I mean, that is really one of the basic qualitative kind of measurements. There is obviously a ton of other ones, you know, and it, again, as Femi said, as a brand, as an organization, you can create your own custom sort of qualitative kind of metrics, which is totally unique to your organization. There is such a huge variety of options available. And I think that is what maybe scares people off measurement as well, because there's hundreds of options available. They try and do all 100 options, then it becomes overwhelming. So if you can create your own very much qualitative kind of metrics, but again, I'll echo what Femi said. It depends very much on your objectives. And I mean, I'll dig into some examples maybe later in this discussion from actual brands which created their own totally custom qualitative kind of measurements. And maybe that specific metric is only applicable for a year, because then that objectives have been achieved and they don't need to keep an eye on it anymore. So yes, again, crucial is to keep those brand goals and objectives in mind, so that you measure the right things. Just because you can measure something doesn't mean you need to, because maybe it's not relevant for you at all, and you'll be wasting time on and effort and resources on trying to measure that. But you know, you need to measure what's important.
Thank you. Just briefly, you know, since we have actually understood what, you know, these the role that qualitative metrics and quantitative metrics, you know, play in evaluation of PR efforts, how do you think we can, how do they complement each other?
All right.
Or one and
Okay. Thank you, Ezedi, and thank you, Femi, Francois, and Steph, for the intervention. First, the fact that both of them are very operational and functional means that one cannot be exclusively seen to be better off, or totally, you know, better off to write off the other one, because the value lies, I would say, in their triangulation, in their capacity to be used, you know, together. You know, from the quantitative point, I think a few weeks ago we were working with a higher institution who had just introduced, from a very practical point now, who had just introduced a first set of an academic program that was administered to students. So the first batch of students, you know, had taken the program, and they needed to understand how to gain from that first batch and then be able to see how they could influence the subsequent batch. And we were working on designing a process of gaining effective or useful insight. So what we did was to first and foremost design a quantitative tool like survey, you know, that was administered to all of the students who had taken part in the first cohort of the program. And from that particular quantitative tool, we gain insights, you know, through the surveys. But we also decided to identify people who did well in terms of ranking, you know, the topmost rung of students from the program, and then the lower rung of the students for the program. We identified them and sent them messages and requested whether they could consent to being interviewed through an in-depth interview process. And what that did actually was that it helped us to gain plethora of insights. You know, the first aspect, the survey, you know, was more numerical in terms of the outcomes, what you did not like or what you didn't like, based on, you know, select criteria. But in the in-depth interview, we're able to find people's peculiar pain points, I would say, peculiar concerns or issues that were very clear and helpful in the design of not just the curriculum, but also even in terms of its delivery, duration, and a lot of other elements. So quantitative and qualitative measures in this context, when it comes to brand, it's that it helps to answer different questions. It helps answer the question of how, it helps answer the question of when, it helps answer the question of why. Qualitatively, you want to know if people are choosing, you know, negative or positive or even neutral, why so? Qualitative options help you to delve deeper beyond just the superficial ticks off that people may have. So you can get into people's lived experiences. Because when people are interacting with brand, they're not interacting with the brand from a stationary standpoint. You know, it could be emotions, it could be rational, it could be any dimension. So you want to recognize that that interaction itself can be mapped from a much more qualitative point in terms of people's thought processes, perceptions, and also from the point of how much the message is driving certain behavioral outcomes or expectations. So harmonizing both is very helpful, and it gives you a fuller picture of that. But then, of course, you have to look at, okay, what budget are you working at? But the real thing lies in what is the message? Oh, sorry, what is the objective you're trying to achieve? You know, that objective would define how you design your instruments of measurement and how you implement those instruments of measurement, and then, of course, the subsequent analysis that will come from that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and then then I want to know. So, Steph, let me come to you. What roles, does PR play in shaping and maintaining brand health?
Well, PR sits alongside other parts of the marketing mix. PR typically, against what's called the PESO model, paid, earned, shared, or social or owned model, is PR often is the earned bit of that model. You've obviously got some paid activity going on in terms of advertising that you might be doing, and paid social media activity that you might be doing. The paid stuff you can often control. The earned stuff you often can't control. And so being able to measure PR, perhaps more so than actually being able to measure elements around paid activity, can help you to manage some of those things, because there are elements of PR that are ultimately outside of your control. You can receive coverage that you didn't want to. You can receive negative media. You can receive negative messaging through PR. And I think that's why it's really important to be able to measure that. I think PR can also improve brand health, because people trust other parties when they're talking about perhaps a topic or an issue, perhaps more so than the brand. And so if you're having a third party, an advocate, a journalist, a commentator, an influencer talking about your brand in a positive way, that can add more weight really than the brand itself talking about itself in a positive way, because of course you're going to talk about yourself positively. That's the nature of advertising. So I think PR can help drive not just awareness, but actually sort of consideration and perhaps consumer choice, actual action to perhaps go buy a product or change a behavior. And I think that's where PR can sit in the mix in terms of really sort of changing sentiment, building trust through that use of that third party advocacy, but really also in terms of driving specific behaviors. And I think that AMEC's framework, which speaks to that. AMEC has an integrated evaluation framework, and Francois and I worked hard many years ago, I think at the beginning of 2020, putting together educational resources around the AMEC framework, which are available to AMEC members and through its website, to explore how PR metrics specifically speak to each of those elements, whether it's an output, what people perhaps might be seeing about brand or the organization, or whether it's an outtake, which is what they might be thinking about a brand or an organization, or whether it's an outcome, which is actually what they're doing as a result of perhaps being exposed to communications from that organization, are all part of really demonstrating how earned media, how news and PR activities in particular can really drive meaningful change through communications. Back to you. I don't know, Zadie, if you've frozen, or does anybody else want to jump in with a competing or a supplementary idea there?
I'll jump in just to add, obviously. I'm sorry. Again, what I said earlier, it's you know, the public relations it's all in the word. You know, it's building relations with different publics, and that's why I hate, particularly when the marketing industry refers to a target audience as the consumers. I'm not a fan of the word consumers. It always makes me think of, you know, a lot of pests devouring the land, consumers, you know, but, you know, it's people that you need to speak to. And you want to build a good relationship. There's so many case studies which we've worked and seen through the years where sometimes a crisis is going to happen. You know, crises happen, but it's how you respond to that. And people tend to be very forgiving, but if you ignore them, this enrages them much more. We had a case study in South Africa, or an event just now in March, where one of the big insurers, a lady complained about issues on social media, and they just brushed her off. And the next thing, thousands of people started commenting and complaining about them, and they just kept on doing a copy and paste response. And the more they did this, the bigger the issue became. It ran into mainstream media, and it became a big crisis affecting the share price, where if the social media people who had to deal with the complaint just had a little bit of more common sense, they could have stopped this right there and then, instead of this escalating into an issue where the share price dropped by about 10%, which is obviously millions in value. Femi, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, in terms of PR, so personally for me, I think PR is all about storytelling, how well you can tell your story, and I think that's why PR is sometimes different from advertising or marketing. And I'd like to add something that about PR, that a particular misconception about PR. So, for example, when there is a crisis and you hear that a brand is bringing in PR, maybe a PR consultant or PR agency, the next thing that comes to people's mind is, oh, they are bringing these guys to come and lie again. But I think that's a total misconception about PR, because PR is just about helping you to tell your story better, right? And for me, I think that's the power of PR. And personally, for me, I think that's one thing I find so interesting about PR, is just how much you can tell the story, and this is about relating the key messages and things like that. And I always say to people that when you see a journalist write a press release and you see a PR professional write a press release, it will be different, because for PR, you're always looking to tell a story. You're looking beyond just breaking the news. There's something you want people to catch up with. There's something you want them to take from whatever information you're bringing. So I think for what, in terms of what PR is doing to shape brand health, it's all about how they help to tell the story. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, perhaps I would just add to that. I think it was 2 months ago in Abuja, Frodo who runs the PR of, because of my background in psychology, of our educational institutions and the work we do within the educational space. the school was being vilified, I would say, within the social media space because of an incident that's happened. And the only way it could actually, just to write on what I said so far, it could actually clear that narrative and put the facts, as they were within the public space, so that people can begin to engage with it based on formal communication. Was for a press release to come that helped the school tell its own side of the story. Why? Because it's very easy in today's world for social media to deal a very solid blow to any brand. And if you do not leverage the given birth to, so it's
yeah, I think we
essential. And I think what that does for me is that sorry. What does for me is that PR validates itself. That's the way I like to say it. That PR itself, its value lies in its capacity to validate itself when it's done professionally and effectively. Thank you.
Yeah, Charles, please, before I will even let you go, what are the key indicators, professionals should monitor in assessing brand health, on real-time basis? Yeah. What indicators do you think PR practitioners should look out for?
I've got some ideas. If
I don't
you
know
want
if
me
it's
to
only
comment.
me, because I can't hear Charles B again. Is it only me?
Okay. Sorry. Now you can hear me. Thank you. I just got up. I didn't know that my microphone was still, some indicators that come up for me on top of my head, it's market performance. This is market performance is very, if you're dealing with whether it's social marketing you're looking at, or you're looking at clear marketing strategies that are meant to target specific publics, in terms of whether goods or services or your brand as a whole. You need to be able to monitor as a PR, what is the market performance, for that particular brand that you're working with. And because influencers or celebrities, as the way we would use it, and I would use the example of Glo, the Glo telecommunications network in Nigeria. There was a whole lot of celebrity endorsements in terms of their use of such influencers to drive. So PR, professionals can also monitor, in terms of celebrity engagements or endorsements, market performance, even social media activities, or, in terms of the communities, using content analysis on the one hand, what are the kind of communications or messages being shared within the social media space about a particular brand? What is the tendency towards that in terms of even that community engagement, and a couple of other ones. So these are some of the indicators I believe that PR professionals can leverage, in monitoring or assessing brand health. But of course, other ones could be
Femi, when it comes to that, Femi, sorry, Femi, can you hear me? Yeah,
yes, I can.
It has been mentioned, market performance. And I know many clients always ask that question, market performance, as if maybe a good PR will always, is the only determining factor when it comes to market performance. If a good PR, there are some other things like pricing, like the state of the market out there can actually impact, on market performance. So how, I don't know if you've come across such equation when they say, how does it affect my bottom line? how would you want to, how do you think that question could be answered, from either PR or marketing communications perspective? Yes.
Well, to be honest, I've had cases like that before, and one thing with PR is you need to be truthful to yourself and truthful to the client. And for me, I think that's a no. I don't think PR, you should measure PR um, um, from sales, I would say, because I don't think PR will assure you that it would increase your market sales, right? For me, there are other key indicators to measure PR, but I don't think that should be one of it. It would be unfair to PR because PR is just to get your. Sorry, do you want to add something before I go forward? Okay. So because for PR, it's like I said, for me, it's about the storytelling, and so I could actually tell your story, bring out, create brand awareness, but I that won't automatically translate to people purchasing the goods or whatever it says you have. So I think for me that would be really unfair to PR in that sense.
Yeah, just to add to that, the reality is you can have the best PR or marketing in the world, but if your product or service is poor or defective, you're not going to make any kind of difference. So that is where obviously the operational side of an organization and the communication side need to work together, because you can tell a good story as much as you want, but if you're not delivering what you're promising on the ground, your PR is not being much for you.
Thank you. Then Steph, please, if you could assist us in how do you use media analysis to gauge the effectiveness of PR efforts on brand health?
Oh, can I just add a point to the previous question before I launch into that as well? Just about how PR can sometimes affect the bottom line. I just had a specific example that Charles might be able to relate to with his work in the education sector. I was on the board of directors of a technical college here in the north of England, and a technical college is funded by government funding. Bums on seats equals funding in the publicly funded education sector. And this particular organisation had decided to cut back on its marketing. And I was able to demonstrate through media analysis, actually, that the impact of them cutting back on their marketing had a direct correlation on their financial viability as a college, to the extent to which that they actually got into significant financial trouble and had to merge with another organisation. And it was because they cut back on their marketing, because people didn't know about the college, didn't know about its great work. It was suffering from a negative reputation, and people were then refusing to apply to be a student at that college and were going to the competing colleges. And this turned into a vicious spiral of financial decline for the organisation. So I just wanted to sort of highlight that sometimes marketing can have a direct correlation with the bottom line, and I just wanted to bring that example to life. I think your question just now was, how do you use media analysis to gauge the effectiveness of PR efforts on brand health?
Yes.
And I'm reflecting on a project I did. It was about 5 or 6 years ago now, I think. It was for a small PR agency here in the UK. I think she was a freelance practitioner, actually, and it shows that media evaluation can be done by organisations of all shapes and sizes and all budgets. And this PR practitioner had been asked to support a man who was rowing across the world. But he was rowing across the world. He was rowing across the Atlantic, sorry. But he was doing it with only one leg, which I think is an amazing achievement in itself. And what she had been asked to do was to help him with his fundraising task, because obviously he was rowing across the world to raise funds for a particular charity. and he had a particular fundraising target he needed to achieve, and he wasn't quite getting there. So he enlisted the support of some PR to get him to that destination. And we were able to demonstrate through analytics and through collecting both media coverage about this particular endeavor, but also looking at, luckily now we have these digital fundraising schemes where you can donate money to a cause, and we can all see when that money was donated, and sometimes if the person isn't anonymously donating, you can see who they are and so on. And we were able to scrape the level of contributions, charitable contributions that he received against the date ranges, and we were able to see a direct correlation between the PR practitioner getting involved and a fourfold increase in donations to this particular charitable endeavor. So I just wanted to share that there are ways in which you can demonstrate the impact that PR has, perhaps by looking at other data sources as well. So not just looking at the media coverage achieved or some of the social media elements, but also considering some of that kind of outcome data. And in this particular case, it was around when people were donating to this particular cause.
Yeah, thank you very much, Steph. And I come back to you, Van Dijk. What steps can PR professionals take to ensure the accuracy and reliability of brand health data that they collect? What steps that PR professionals can take?
I think and this is a challenge I've seen a lot in agencies, particularly if they use discredited metrics such as advertising value equivalence and all of that. I've never seen an agency tell their client that they actually did a terrible job on this campaign. I'm not aware of a single instance like this anywhere in the world, because it's not in their interest to do that. They'll lose the client. But if you look at the Barcelona principles again, proper measurement is rooted, and we've said it earlier in this discussion as well. It needs to be truthful. It needs to be with integrity and done through transparency. And that is also one of the main principles of the Barcelona principles, and that you should get some actionable insights out of that. So I think, it's a tough one, particularly for agencies. Maybe for brands it's easier. But I find it's always good to have an independent view on this. So that you don't look at it through your own rose-colored glasses, because we're close to our brand, everything is always great, or we believe it's probably more positive than it is. So it is good to have a sort of independent view, like what people like Steph and what P Plus is doing, or even Ornica, because we look at it from an independent perspective. So you get a true story from that. Because the reality is not, like I said earlier, not every campaign is successful. And I think even for agencies, there's still value in this, because if you know you are on the wrong path, you want to know that before the client knows it, so that you can correct and improve your campaign. So even from that perspective, it's important to have those learnings. Because a lot of the time you learn more out of your failures than what you learn from your successes. So I think an independent view, but keeping transparency and integrity is crucial. Don't massage the numbers to make you look great or to prove something which is not really true.
Yeah, we have talked about the importance of this evaluation in PR, but maybe just for 2 minutes, what advice will you give PR professionals who do not evaluate PR?
Okay. Advice to professionals. maybe I will just write on what Van Dijk just said about data cleaning, in terms of accuracy and reliability. What I've noticed sometimes, I work, with data, and I often sometimes see that the 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 sample size many people use, a lot of times there are people who want to work from the answer to the question, and they just expect that they should come out with a certain output in terms of their data analysis. And so they collect data that tend to answer that particular question. And that, for me, it's a problem. It definitely would affect accuracy and reliability of brand health data. And so I keep believing that, in order for PR to execute its value and communicate its value proposition, design thinking elements, should come into play. Why is it so? Oftentimes, when you're dealing with brand health, you have to recognize user profiles. Who are the various users? Van Dijk talked about customer, the use of the term customer. I also have concerns about that. So I preferred, the concept of user, the user concept. People who interact with any particular brand, you can see them from the user dimension or the user element or user perspective. So understanding the user profiles, the different demographics, can be very helpful, and then maintaining a more unbiased or objective approach to data collection can also be very helpful. And then, of course, also the sampling size. So down to the question of an advice I would like to give PR professionals who do not evaluate PR, I would say, the first question I will ask is, how are you measuring your success? Really, if you're not evaluating PR, how are you measuring your success? Because success has to be something tangible, something that you can hold on to, something that you can actively expect to see and then begin to work towards. So my advice would be, you need to invest in developing capabilities, in PR evaluation. You need to invest in that. You need to invest in developing tools, or in understanding the tools that will also help in your evaluation. You need to develop a mindset and capability for objectivity, and then, of course, the courage to also share whether the good news or the bad news. And this is where the qualitative dimension comes in, because when you understand the data you have with you, you can begin to ask yourself, why is this data the reality? Why is it so? What are the things that might have happened to this point as the output of the data, outcome of the data, and what can we do to influence that? Because many times when brands or organizations face issues with return on investment and everything, and they want to begin to cut budget, often more than not, they want to cut the budget for PR, and then when issues arise as a result of having cut that budget, they expect PR to perform some kind of magic. So there has to be a deliberate intention or deliberate commitment, for PR professionals to see to what extent their intervention is tied to organizational business objectives, business goals. You must be able to communicate that, because if you don't communicate that, you can't just isolate yourself as a PR professional and expect management or organizations to just budget for that. There has to be a whole lot of strategic linkage between what PR does and what the business objective of the organization are. But then you must invest in capability building. It's very important. If you don't invest in capability building, you probably wouldn't get any outcome. Then you answer the question, what is the software?
Jasby, let us cut it for now, because we are still going to go back for to question and answer session now. But before we do that, we want to request if we could share our favorite measurement and evaluation quote. If that's available. But before we go to question and answers, a brief rundown of what has happened in the past 1.25 hours, where we agree that, nobody is doing PR if you are not measuring, and then we talked about brand health being an encompassing thing. It's not just like one issue that is being discussed. It's overall issues that border around client brand health. And then there is another point that there must be collaboration, that PR should not be a standalone. There should be a collaboration between the other members of the IMCs, to have an effective brand health. Then we agree that, again, there are many indices, which some of us talked about: market performance, reach, and all those kind of things. Because in measurement, they say it's about, distance, time and reach, So like in communication also, it has to be quality, where the reach of your message, the quality of that message, and the time to which the message goes out from you and reaches the audience, and maybe have a feedback. So at this point, I want to ask members of the audience who have questions. Excuse me. You could just raise your hand, for question, because you are in for question and answer session. Yeah. Any question from the members of the audience? Well, until that happens, Van Dijk, do you have any indicators that you can share for us, about this measurement or evaluation? Good for us, while we wait for members of the audience to ask their questions. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, talking about qualitative measurements, I would like to expand on what I mentioned earlier, that you can create it totally customized to your own brand. We had a financial institution here in South Africa who's been around for 100 years. Their full name was Alexander Forbes, but everyone always referred to them as Alex Forbes. But to such an extent that they went on a rebranding exercise about 2 years ago, where they adopted the name Alex Forbes as the official name with a new logo. They wanted a much younger target audience and clients. And that was one of the measurements we created for them, is how does the media, but not just the media, social media users as well, refer to the brand? Are they adopting the new name? Are they using the old name? And we could track these changes over time, and we could identify, the individual journalists, which may have still used the old name, and they could take, liaise with those journalists. A strange trend we picked up is that on social media, people were referring more and more to the old brand, which was quite strange. So they could re-emphasize the rebranding. So there is, depending, now today that metric is no longer relevant, but it was 2 years ago. So you can create any kind of sort of a qualitative metric, which you can measure depending on what your objective is. That was just one of the metrics, but I think it's one which illustrates well what you can do. Instead of just looking at volume or reach or sentiment, there's lots of other issues you can measure.
Yeah, Femi, thank you, Van Dijk. Femi, please, let me come to you. In Nigeria today, we take media reports as end media. In as much as most times, we send out press releases, and sometimes these press releases are backed by some brown envelope. how do you think this practice, impacts on evaluation, the integrity of the evaluation indices? Yeah.
Thank you for that. You mentioned something that is really, really that is not helping.
I
It's
know
not helping.
we don't mention these things, but we know it happens.
Yeah, of course, of course, and it's so sad because it's killing PR and also journalism, right? Because now it's so hard when to see readers don't even see stories as being organic again, right? They just see it and they feel, oh, PR paid this journalist to just publish this thing. So it's making us lose that power of storytelling that PR should be having. And as well, I think it's killing journalism as well because even journalists, I'm sorry to say, have been lazy about it these days. You see that I've seen cases where a journalist can't actually write an article, right? They don't even, because all they do is give me this press release, let me publish it for you. Give me this article, let me publish it for you. Then here's my account number. So I think it's a sad thing, and to be honest, it is. Well, I don't think it affects the measurement per se because the PR professional is trying to get the message out there, and unfortunately, it's something that you should pitch normally. And if it's something that is interesting enough, the journalist should be interested and then pick that up. But unfortunately, even if your story is so good, the journalist is probably not interested if there's no if you're not going to offer any brown envelope. I remember when I just started PR, there was this event that we had for Ford. So they had the first Ford assembled car in Nigeria. And I was still new to PR. I was expecting journalists to be crazy about this story. It should be something they're hustling for, to say, I want to cover this, I want to attend this event. This is something I want to write about. The first Ford assembled car in Nigeria. But unfortunately, they don't seem to be interested. What is in it for me? How much are you giving me to come for these events, to write this story and things like that? So it was a bit strange to me, and I felt bad, right? So, but as a PR professional, you want to measure your coverage. What's the volume of your coverage? What's the sentiment and things like that? Well, I don't think you say because a journalist was paid for that, going to count it as part of my coverage, or it's not going to be a positive mention. Really, it's just. I think it is what it is, right? You just try to.
You see, Femi, I like I said, we don't want to always talk about it, because I was being nuanced. Like, I don't want it to be like I used to think like it's a black man thing or something, or Nigerian thing. But from even from here, I could see some people are telling me that is not actually a Nigerian thing, that is a global phenomenon, sort of. It only depends on the level which it plays. Because I have had an occasion I had to take some journalists out to go visit. Trips paid for, flight tickets, accommodation booked, feeding paid for. And at the end, the journalist was asking, what do I take home? All those kind of things. So, but it's what it is. So please, just be, if I come to you, please, because we don't have time, we only have 5 minutes to round this off. What do you think? What advice do you think to small businesses who can quite afford, this media measuring services? How do you think they should go about it? Just for 2
First and
minutes, so that
foremost,
we will use other people.
I probably would speak for even less. For small businesses who may not, I mean, every business should be concerned about its brand health. That's very important. As far as you're serving a public, you should be able to focus on your brand health. But if you can't afford that very large scale service, I believe that Right now, what I know is that quite a number of PR organizations, service organizations have, I would say, cocktail of services for different categories of businesses. And you may need to identify what is it that you need the PR service for first and foremost, and then be able to also be open enough to know that you can engage a service that meets your needs. It's not just, I wouldn't say budgeting is important, but you must also ask yourself, what do you need that service for, and how can you leverage that? In Nigeria, for instance, Small Medium Enterprise Development Agency of Nigeria, offers a platform. I know for a fact, offers.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I think, Chazvi, we've even lost you, but in line with what you are saying, I am aware.
Businesses
aware,
of
sorry,
like
Charles.
mind within a particular segment to. So what I was looking at the fact that rather than
Charles, I don't know if it's me because
go alone, go solo, you could leverage a network, of similar business, an umbrella similar service. And then if something is peculiar to you, you look for a PR service provider that, offers a cocktail of services that sort of aligns with your financial capability, as the case may be. Did you get me, Mr. Zeddy? I don't know whether
I can say that
I'm speaking to myself. The network, it's
but I could see. Van Dyke, before I come to you, I know that P Plus measurement services, they have different bouquets that can answer to the needs of every company who needs media services. I'm sure for about this. So Van Dyke, as you are saying, please you help us say your end remarks so that, because we're almost at the end of this session. Yeah. So maybe last words.
Yeah, from a small business kind of and affordability perspective as well. There's many options. You don't always need to go for the big expensive kind of things. You need to have something applicable to you. But I think cost effectiveness is also a relative term. I always try and explain to some of our clients, they want to pay us. We may charge them for a entry-level service $100 a month. And, they will say that's expensive. But the reality is, if they just had to subscribe to the main daily newspapers, it would cost them $1,000 a month. Then there's still no data. So it depends on the context. On a very basic level, I think what those small businesses need to do is at least some social listening. I think that is what technology has made it easier for us, because we can directly interact with our customers and clients as businesses. And it's not just a client service kind of a platform. You can even use that for product development. So from that perspective, at least consider, measuring your own social media channels, who those people are, what they're saying, and maybe focus more on listening to what's happening out there than trying to just send out tons of messages.
Thank you, Van Dyke. Please, because you're at the end of this session. Yeah, Steph, please, any last remarks, please? Just maybe a few seconds, please.
Yeah, just to build on what Francois was saying and to answer Philip's question about those with limited resources, beyond just what people are saying about your brand on social media, consider the amazing power of the data that we can get from Google. Use Google Trends to explore how they've been searching about a brand or topic over time. You can go back pretty much 20 years worth of data. Use Google Trends to see how they're looking, how they're searching about your brand today in the past 24 hours. That data is free. Most of us have got a Google account. You don't even need a Google account to look up that data. So yeah, take guidance from how people are searching about your brand as well as what they're saying about your brand online.
All right, thank you, Femi. Anyway, last words, 5 seconds, please.
Yeah, just to add to what everyone has said, I think the first thing is don't scare yourself by thinking this is something I can't afford for my business because I'm a small business owner. Everyone mentioned how you can look for just tailored services that can help you. So you don't have to scare yourself at first to say, oh, this is something I can't afford. It's a service that is too big for me.
All right. Thank you all for coming as speakers, Van Dyke, Steph, Charles B, and Femi. And I also thank everyone who has joined this meeting. It's been a pleasure, and I will always say it's my pleasure being part of this. I see PR, as a calling, because I've been here for close to 22 years, more than 2 decades actually. So it's always nice interacting with people I can call my colleagues, whether offshore or onshore. Thank you very much for coming. And to other people who joined, thank you very much. I think we have come to the end of this. I thank Media PR P+ Measuring Services for giving this opportunity to me and to all of us. And I say, have a lovely day ahead and a lovely weekend, actually. Thank God it's Friday. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, and have a great weekend.